Hi folks, thanks for watching my monologue. As you may have heard, there's been a recent run on guns and ammunition. I just wanted to let you know that Guns Etc. is in a 10,200 square foot building which holds a lot of guns. So Guns Etc. is open and has a lot of product. Or you can go to gunsetc.com, that's gunsetc.com. And if you like my monologue, please subscribe to our channel using 960 The Patriot. Well, welcome back, April 16th, 2020. So it turns out some old friends are criticizing me and Bill Bennett, people like Jonah Goldberg and Rich Lowry. If they'd called me or offered to debate, I'd take them up in a second. They know me well. I've done a lot of work with them in the past, even some favors. But Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, spent a whole column today trying to take our points from yesterday down. He's gripped by an idea fix about mitigating factors and looking at all the wrong data. Yes, it's the data the New York Times and CBS and PBS and CNN pushes, but it's not the right data. And when editors of National Review are just aping CNN and CBS and the New York Times, I have to ask what the point of National Review is. Let me respond generally, and the point is facts and facts with regard to the coronavirus. One, we're being criticized for not recognizing that the distancing measures or the mitigation orders across the country didn't make a difference. The truth is, we don't know. Maybe in some places, maybe not others, maybe not at all. Research out of Israel shows that there's a 7 to 8 week period of this virus, and then it more or less disappears, and countries that did harsh lockdowns as well as countries that did not. As Aristotle put it in the Nicomachean Ethics, fire burns in Rome as it burns in Persia. 2, we also have to recognize that out of the University of Oxford, and slowly being adopted by others here, there's thinking 50% of the population already had the virus and didn't know it. What lockdowns and shutdowns would do given that is obviously nothing but harmful. 3, we have the Princess Cruise, perhaps the best petri dish we have. Half who had the virus on that cruise had no symptoms at all. Of over 3,000 passengers there, 7 died, all older. 4, then we have the states here. Everything is simply not New York. Take 2 big and well-traveled states, Missouri and Florida. They were late to order social distancing and stay-at-home orders, 2 weeks after New York did. And you look at their per capita rates of infection and death. Florida has 5% the number of deaths as New York per capita. 10% the number of infections per capita. Missouri, 5% the number of deaths as New York per capita, 7% the numbers of infections per capita. 5, our point is, what is the trigger to shut down the country and add a bigger body count? From deaths and diseases of despair, a bigger body count than the virus itself. My gosh, we've already had at least 43,000 deaths in America this year due to pneumonia. We'll see a minimum of 60,000, and that's an undercount, from drug overdoses. We're at less than 30,000 COVID-19 deaths here, mostly from the elderly. 6, one of the first things we did was shut down schools. Over 55 million children disrupted in their social and learning life for a disease they simply will not be touched by. Yes, but couldn't they spread it? Some will argue. Yes, but couldn't they spread the flu? And the flu takes anywhere from 30,000 to 60,000 a year. By the way, let's talk about hospitalizations. We've needed 65,000 hospitalizations for this virus. We need hundreds of thousands each year for the flu. A total of 3 children under the age of 18 have died from the coronavirus in New York City. Not 3%, 3. And each of them had underlying conditions. So yes, I believe we've overreacted with consequences that will be far more reaching and far more deadly than this virus. So to protect us from something that looks like the annual flu here, maybe less, we will see a second phase of massive problems from unemployment, suicide ideation, drug and alcohol abuse, and depression. I've been talking about the 60 to 70,000 lives we lose each year from drugs for decades. I don't need lectures on how I don't care about life. That all said, thank you, National Review, for swallowing hook, line, and sinker the left-wing line of hysteria that has put more families at risk, that has put our entire economy at risk. What risk comes from closing the economy? It's not small. Beyond the money taken out of the system, which Steve Moore spoke with us about yesterday, the literature is vast, as any web search will reveal. The conclusion? Unemployment is a much bigger killer than I even realized. Here's 4 stories that popped up quickly on the topic. 1, unemployment can increase rates of death 50% in cardiac patients. Cardiac patients. In other words, people with underlying conditions. It's a big one. For every 1% increase in unemployment, you can see a rise of 47,000 deaths, including 26,000 deaths from heart attacks, about 1,200 from suicide, 831 murders, and 635 deaths related to alcohol consumption. That's from a second story. Third story, unemployment strongly associated with suicide in 18 to 24-year-olds. Finally, if unemployment increases by 5% in the current economic shutdown, that could mean some 16,500 additional suicides. A 10% spike in unemployment could mean some 30,000 additional suicides. Now, I realize some of these numbers conflict. So do coronavirus numbers and projections conflict, though, by the way. But what we know is one big thing. Unemployment alone raises death rates by tens of thousands. That's not even talking about issues having to do with church and synagogue closings, or school closings, or free 12-step and rehab organization closings, or strapped nonprofits that provide food and shelters, they being closed too, or the psychological effects from students having their daily life completely upended, including millions, not thousands, but millions being removed from the one place they may be getting a solid meal or even just an adult in their daily lives. We ready for that? We are not. Again, for those that tell me I'm dismissing the benefits of shutdowns and stay-at-home orders, riddle me this. Did it before, I'll do it again. Take 2 big and well-traveled states, Missouri and Florida. They were late to order social distancing and stay-at-home orders. They were 2 weeks after New York. And you look at their per capita rates of infection and death. Florida has 5% the number of deaths as New York per capita, 10% the number of infections per capita. Missouri has 5% the number of deaths as New York per capita, 7% the number of infections per capita. You can play that game with other states too. New York should not be cosmologizing its deficiencies. Not everything is Gotham or has to be Gotham. Finally, there's a family medicine doctor here in Arizona named Jennifer Fonches. If anyone knows her, she's going to be on my show tomorrow. She wrote the following in an open letter to the governor. Here's an excerpt. Policymakers insist we need to take the extreme measures to protect the vulnerable. But what definition of vulnerable are you using? Are you including your citizens who are vulnerable to poverty, substance abuse, neglect, mental illness, domestic violence, child and elder abuse, and suicide? Are you aware that our millennials are expected to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents due to substance abuse and mental illness? COVID-19 targets the old and sick, but isolation and loneliness kill indiscriminately. We are embarking on a time when overdoses, assaults, murders, and suicides due to this forced media recession may far outnumber the deaths caused by the virus. Sadly, the U.S. suffers nearly 50,000 suicides annually, a number which will surely increase given the recent unemployment and isolation that has been imposed upon us. My husband was widowed during our last economic recession when an out-of-work architect attempted suicide by running his SUV into his late wife's sedan. My stepson's colleague committed suicide last week, and I personally know of 2 other suicides in the past 2 weeks. Daily, I am treating patients for pandemic-related anxiety and depression, and no doubt I will soon lose some of those to suicide and substance abuse as well. Would your citizens choose this trade-off? I'm not sure, but at the very least, educate them as to these realities and let them decide which vulnerable population they opt to save. Doctor, thank you. I want you to think about New York City and the state of New York and cosmologizing its deficiencies. And I want you to think about, as a society, what it means to forcibly close institutions of composition, churches, synagogues, gyms, recreational outlets, outdoor activities, outdoor gatherings, and the best parts of our schools. Things we're told are healthy because we know they are. I'm Seth. We'll be right back.